You're listening to the Entrepreneur Ignited podcast, where we aim to simplify online business so you can make more money. Now, here's your host, Gehl.
Hi everyone, Gehl here, and welcome to the Entrepreneur Ignited podcast. And I'm really excited about our guest today, a gentleman by the name of Geoff Ronning. And not only is Geoff a very successful entrepreneur online, he's also an expert and authority surrounding what I would consider to be one of the most powerful selling tools that we have available as online businesses today. And that tool that I'm referring to is webinars. So first, Geoff, let me say welcome and thank you for taking the time to be here today.
My pleasure, Derek. My pleasure.
Awesome. And, over the next about 45 minutes, I'm going to try and suck as much information out of you as humanly possible because I know you have an immense amount of expertise in the webinar space. And as many of our listeners are in the process right now of starting, growing online businesses. And so before I get into mining your expertise for as much webinar gold as possible, can you just take a few minutes and just share with us your story? I mean, how did you get to be where you are today, running what has become, I think, one of the leading webinar marketing software companies on the internet?
The
leading. Good catch.
Oh no, I'm just kidding. Yeah, there's a lot of great softwares out there, but still Seminar is pretty good. So how did I get started running that? Well, I always had a great love of business and entrepreneurship, and also the power of the mind. And so even as a young kid, like in sixth grade, I got in trouble for hypnotizing kids at camp, and got in trouble that same year for hypnotizing kids in the bathroom, which sounds really weird now. But and all that led to a very successful entertainment career in stage hypnosis. And so I had and still have the top membership site for stage hypnosis on the internet. It's been years since I've really actively participated in that business. But originally, I just assumed that there was automated webinars out there because I've always been a huge fan of automation my entire life. And so for this membership website, I went in search of a system that would allow me to automate my webinars, because I was doing a lot of webinars. They were incredibly profitable. But then after a while, you kind of want to slam your head against the wall because you're tired of doing the same webinar again and again.
Yep.
So when I looked, I was shocked to see that there was no automated webinar. And so I thought, well, that'd be simple to make. And boy, was I wrong about that. It took over 2 years and a lot of really terrific, unbelievably powerful programmers that couldn't even do the job until I stumbled onto one person that could. And so originally, Stealth Seminar wasn't made for Stealth Seminar. It was made for me. And I was lucky enough in that business to have a lot of what would be commonly referred to as internet gurus that were clients of mine, and they started to see what I was doing, and they asked to use it. And finally, my wife said, Geoff, you should take their money and you should let them use it. So that's how Stealth Seminar came to be.
So let's take a step back. I mean, we're throwing around terms like Stealth Seminar and automated webinars, and we know exactly what it is because we've been using them for years. But when I use that terminology when I'm speaking at events and stuff like that, people go, what's an automated webinar? What's a stealth seminar? And so give us the rundown. What the heck are we talking about?
Sure. So a webinar itself is a presentation that is given online. It's a presentation from one or multiple people to many. So just like a meeting, like a seminar at a hotel, only it's all done electronically. And the webinar can be used to, to distribute any content you would distribute any other way. So it could be used to teach people. It could be used to sell. It could be used to offer content, and anything else you want to. So traditionally, webinars have always been done via manual labor, just like if you were speaking in that hotel room. So a person has to plan it out on their calendar, has to make sure their internet's working, has to get on and has to deliver the presentation and has to deal with any technical hiccups that might occur during that. An automated webinar has unbelievable, to me and many other people, has unbelievable advantages because it's not manual labor. What it is you get the opportunity to create the exact presentation you want. You record it, and then you automate it. So I could record it once, and I could play it 24 times a day if I like. And I can choose to either have that automated webinar look live, I can choose to make it obvious it's not live, or I can choose to not say anything and just allow the attendees to come to their own conclusions as to if it's live or if it's not. So it really is all about taking that manual labor out of it, taking all those technical issues, taking all that stuff that goes on in our daily lives. If we're in a good mood, a bad mood, having trouble at home, sick, whatever it is, taking all that out of the picture, creating the most powerful presentation we can for the attendees, and then automating it so that it runs on its own.
And, I love this concept. I've done a lot of webinars, I've done a lot of speaking, and, the fact is sometimes you hit it out of the ballpark, right? And you have this fantastic presentation. But then the next time you're just off, right? And so, the power that is exactly what you just said here is you take the absolute best, and then that's what you use going forward. And that creates, I think, from my perspective, a lot more consistency, a lot more reliable results than having to be on every single time. Now, one of the things that I think a lot of people have trouble wrapping their heads around, though, is this whole, it appears to be live. Okay. And, one of the questions I get is, well, what do you mean it appears to be live? Is it live? Is it not live? Is there a hybrid of that? Is there any, ethical issues surrounding having a webinar that appears to be live, but's not live? So, what's your take on that?
Sure. Those are all great considerations. And, some of those questions I think can only be answered by the individuals themselves. Mm-hmm. Having said that, I think in the world today, in business today, entrepreneurs rely on a lot of automation. And so automated webinars are obviously kind of the newest type of automation in business. But I don't see them as any different as like all the other automation that entrepreneurs rely on every day, whether that's personalized mail, whether that's drip marketing, whether that's autoresponders. Like for instance, if people are using an autoresponder, they're probably not starting out their email saying, this is not a live email that was written today. This was actually written in December of 2011. Right?
Exactly.
And so the webinar for me is the exact same thing. Now, I personally, this is the way I feel about it, and I'm not saying it's right for someone else and they have to feel this way, but my comfort level is to not say this is a live event. My comfort level is just to say, hey, we got a webinar. It's going to be this day. It's going to be this time. And then allow the people to come to their own conclusions. Now, in all likelihood, most of them are going to come to the conclusion that it is live. And that's incredibly valuable because something magical happens when they're having a live experience, even if that live experience is automated. you get a much deeper connection with somebody. And so if you like, I can talk about that, or we can just jump on to the
Yeah, absolutely. No, keep going with it. Absolutely.
So, tonight, someone could get online, they could go to YouTube and they could watch, whatever it might be, Tony Robbins videos or Britney Spears or, whoever. But there's going to be a whole group of people, thousands, that are also going to be going to a venue. They're going to leave their house. They're going to get babysitters. They're going to drive downtown. They're going to fight traffic. They're going to pay for parking. They're going to, be subjected to security. They're going to go be seated in some tiny, crummy seat where they can hardly see this presentation. But they're going to do that because of that magic, that connection. And the webinar has the exact same effect, because when people are on the webinar and the presenter is there and they perceive that presenter is giving up their time, energy, effort, expertise, well, then you develop rapport, you develop relationships, you develop trust in ways that you cannot duplicate. I mean, it's really incredible what you can accomplish when you're able to do that. And it really, one of the side effects that many people come to realize after doing webinars, and I think it's probably the most surprising thing to them, is how much their attendees, their prospects and their clients appreciate webinars. It really turns them into that authority, that celebrity. And yet it does it all automated.
Absolutely. And, just to back up what you're saying there, I run a lot of webinars, and it's been one of the most powerful tools I've implemented in my business. And two things. First of all, creating a connection and creating that authority with your audience through a webinar is very powerful. And when I started doing regular webinars that were actual live webinars for my members, for my students, it created a level of connection with those people where they felt like they knew me, which we could never recreate via email. Now, one other thing that I want to go back to that you just mentioned, which is so true, is when there's a live event, the response rate is massively higher, even if it's perceived as live, okay? Even if we know it's been scheduled, but if it's a one-time scheduled at a specific time, the response rate is so much better. And I've tested this, okay? I've taken following events, stuff like that, where I've said, okay, I've got a live webinar and you have to schedule to attend, versus, hey, here's a recording of a presentation. Everything else being equal, the presentation, the selling around what's in that presentation, I can't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head, but positioning it as a live event, a live webinar they have to attend, it's so massively outperformed just putting a recording or a video up that, webinars just make sense. And, I just don't feel enough, people use them. And I think a lot of people getting started are, they're scared to. Right? They're afraid to get on a webinar and be what they perceive to be as live, and that's kind of intimidating for people. Now, you've been doing this for a long time. You're obviously very comfortable on that. But what do you say to the beginner who's just getting started, going, "Well, I don't know if I can do a webinar. How am I going to get up and do this live?"
Well, the beautiful thing about automated webinars is that they don't have to do it live. So from the standpoint of addressing this, in my opinion, you'd be far better off to do all automated webinars for some of the reasons we've already talked about, as well as additional ones. And when you create and record the automated webinar, you don't have any stress. You don't have any worry. You don't have any concerns, because you have no pressure. I mean, if you flub up a little bit, you just re-record it. And so That's the beauty of automated. That's one of the many beauties of automated webinars, particularly for people that are uncomfortable giving presentations.
Yeah.
There's nothing that can go wrong that anybody's going to notice because you'll just record it until you're happy with it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so now I want to shift gears, and I want to get into the real powerful stuff. And I had a bit of an ulterior motive to get you on this call today, because I know you're sitting on a absolute wealth of knowledge. You have a unique advantage. If the number I read was correct, you've run over, was it 7 million webinars through your system?
Yes.
So, I mean, that's just an unfathomable amount of webinars. And so, in the world of marketing, the visibility into that kind of data is invaluable. I mean, you have a front row seat to see what's working across multiple different industries, multiple different businesses on webinars. So now what I'd like to do is ask you for the good stuff. And it's kind of a tough question, but today in, where are we at? August 2015, webinars have been around for quite some time now. Automated webinars have now been around for some time. What are the, let's say, 3 to 5 things that if you want to be successful on your webinar, you need to be doing? And let me clarify that. When I say successful, I'm looking at this from a marketing standpoint. Whenever I do a webinar, unless I'm just doing a training webinar for one of my membership communities, if I'm doing a webinar, most of the time I'm trying to create some kind of action, some kind of outcome, whether that be to move someone further through a funnel or to take them across the line in a sale, whatever that may be. So what are the top 3 to 5 things you see people need to be doing today in their webinars to get the desired outcome they want?
Yeah, that is a good question. 3 to 5 things. Just thinking through my mind so I can make sure I deliver. I would say we'll talk about the presentation,
Okay.
and then we can talk about let's start with the presentation. First off, I think, a lot of people, they get their education from attending other webinars. And a lot of times what ends up happening is they end up, kind of following the formula of some webinars that they've attended. But the problem is they don't know if those webinars have been successful or not. And so they end up basically following formulas for failure oftentimes.
Yeah.
So if I were to take 3 to 5 things and really talk about, what it is that is important. You just talked about one, and that is that you come up with a goal. You come up with a goal of what you want, whether it's to change a belief or whatever it is. So, I think it's imperative that you have that goal. And then I also have a concept that I call kill shot. I'm not really a violent person. It just sounds dramatic. And the kill shot is, what is the number one thing that when somebody gets off the webinar, what is the number one thing that has to be in their head that they believe 100%? Now, this typically comes down, or it should come down to like a 1-sentence concise statement. And our goal is obviously to get everybody to convert on every webinar, but we know obviously that's not, that's not realistic. But if we do a good job, particularly with the kill shot, if I know when I get off Derek's webinar, if I know that I 100% can build my own business and start having income within, let's say, 30 days, if I didn't convert on your webinar, if that kill shot makes it to my mind, and if I believe it with all my heart and soul, even if I didn't buy on your webinar, I've got to convert, within a matter of a day or two. And so I really, I think it's important to have the kill shot, something that is concise, that is simple. and that the entire webinar is going to be molded around so that when that person gets off that webinar, they absolutely 100% believe that. And that belief in and of itself is going to motivate those that did not take action to take action. I think the second thing is that most people start off their webinars terrible. It's like, oh, okay, who's here? Oh, great. We're going to wait a few more minutes, and, starting off your webinar is so important that you do it right, you hit it hard, and you create a really compelling opening. Not a, it doesn't have to be super slick. It doesn't have to be like your Mr. Pro, but it has to be professional in the sense that you're not wasting your attendees' time. You know why you're there, and you make it abundantly clear to the attendees why they're there, because those first few minutes, they're making decisions. And there's a lot you can do that will carry through your entire webinar. When you get that wrong, people aren't hooked. People don't end up staying. They end up dropping off. They have a lesser opinion of you. They might get, irritated with you. They might have, rushed to get home. They might have, taken steps to be sure they're on time. And if you're not starting on time, it's disrespectful. And it's going to paint a really incredibly negative image of you. The fourth thing I would say is you want to make sure that you're providing incredibly valuable content so that your webinar attendees stay on your webinar. I was working with somebody just a couple weeks back, and they have over a 90% stick rate, which is really terrific. They did not have that a couple months ago. They had like maybe like a 20 some percent. So when you change the value of the content and you add some psychology and you really hook people and you start them right, obviously your webinar is going to be incredibly successful if you're keeping 90 some percent on versus 20 some percent. And I would say the fifth thing is that the people don't have the presenters don't have a good sense of how to create an offer. They don't understand the psychology of the offer. They don't understand how to really transition. Most people are still trying to do a sneak up sort of offer where it's like all of a sudden they're, hey, I'm Geoff, I'm here to help you. And then all of a sudden they go into the pitch and it's like they're meek, they're uncomfortable. It feels funny to them. It feels funny to the attendees. Everybody gets kind of squeamish and it kills the sales. So those are the 5 things.
Fantastic.
That I see.
And I was just taking notes there because there were tons of good tips in there. Now, as we were going through that, more questions were coming into my mind. So because you get to see so many different webinars out there, here's a couple questions for you. First of all, what is your preference, or what do you see work the most? Now, when you're doing a webinar, obviously you can have a live webcam. People can actually see you live. Or you can take the slide route. So you can prepare a slide deck using PowerPoint, and you can be talking your way through like you would with a live presentation with a PowerPoint. Now, what's your preference, and is there one or the other that you see is the most effective?
Yes. Highest converting would be to start off with your face on a camera. So you start off live, and you introduce yourself briefly. There's something you can do that is staggeringly powerful here, and that is also admit a fault. So you admit a fault that is verifiable by your attendees. So I wouldn't say, I'm not good at soccer. I'd say, geez, welcome to the webinar. I'm just looking here on the monitor. I really need to lose some weight. Now that's something they can verify. They can see. So, or you know what, my teeth or my hair, whatever it is. But you make it something they can verify, and you don't make a big deal out of it. You just drop it in there and say, hey, welcome to the, geez, I'm looking at this monitor. I really need to lose some weight. Anyhow, let's get started. And then go into the slides. And the slides don't have a live action shot of you, but have a picture of you on the slides. And that will be the highest converting.
Got it. Okay, so it's a bit of a hybrid model there. Now, next question for you, and this is one that I hate it when people ask me the average question, but I'm gonna ask it anyway.
Sure.
Because an average is exactly that, right? But what is the average or recommended length for a webinar that is not just a pure content teaching one, but one where you're trying to get an action, an outcome?
So, it's going to differ a little bit based on who the attendees are. So let's say it's somebody that knows you. Let's say it's hey, somebody knows that Derek's been around forever. He's done all this cool stuff. I'm a huge fan of his. Those people that get on your webinar are going to, you can do a longer webinar and you're going to be fine. For the colder traffic, so by longer, what I refer to as longer is, 2 hours max for most people.
Yeah.
Probably closer to 90 minutes or 75 minutes. For the cold traffic, it'd be much better to be in the 60-minute to 75-minute range. No more than that. Now, there's a lot of people out there that do longer webinars. And so I should probably talk about them just briefly. And so the person that comes to mind for me right now who does really terrific longer webinars is Frank Kern. Now, Frank Kern is awesome. I mean, I love the guy. But sometimes people watch what Frank Kern's doing and they think, oh, I'll do a webinar like Frank Kern. Frank Kern did a 3-hour webinar. He did, let's say he did a 75-minute presentation, and then he answered questions for 75 minutes. So I'll do that. But what they don't realize is that they're not Frank Kern. Frank Kern can do that and should do that. So I'm not in any way suggesting that he shouldn't do what he does.
Yeah.
But Frank Kern is a huge celebrity.
Yes.
So if somebody has that same sort of celebrity, why then that gives them the ability to do something like that. But unfortunately, a lot of people that see that, duplicate it without giving it some thought, are then disappointed because what happens is, since they don't have that celebrity, people are not going to naturally hang on their every word. In fact, what people are going to do is get tired of listening to them and bail. And that's the worst thing that can happen, because if they're tired of you for free, they certainly don't want to pay more money to listen to you. So, probably much more thorough, longer answer than you wanted, but
no, that's good. And I want to go back for a second. When you said cold traffic, now make sure we're on the same page. Like cold visitors, how do you define a cold visitor?
Someone that doesn't have a relationship with you. So it can be traffic that you're getting from, let's say, Facebook, pay-per-click, or traffic you're getting from Facebook, your timeline, like your free posts. But the people don't really have a relationship with you. It could be traffic you're buying from Google pay-per-click. It could be traffic that's landing on your website, but doesn't have a relationship with you yet.
Got it. Okay. So we're on the same page for that. Now you're saying with cold traffic, you can typically hold them for 60, 75 minutes.
With a good webinar, yes.
Excellent.
I'm saying that is the highest converting. Yes.
Sure. Okay. And so now let's talk about that. We're trying to create an outcome. Let's say I'm trying to sell my consulting services or something like that. Okay. So now when we start the webinar, it's going to be an education-based webinar, but we're trying to create this outcome. And I've seen it done many ways. I've personally done it many ways. Now, what is your belief that there should be a setup for that sell in the beginning, like effectively letting people know that, hey, I'm going to teach you, and then we're going to talk about more how we can work together? Or do you leave the close to be a little bit of a surprise at the end? Or or are you seeding it throughout?
Seeding it throughout.
Okay. So, and I totally agree with you on that. I think, honestly, I think you should be through the entire thing seeding that process, so there isn't a surprise at the end. All right. So here's I think something I see, a mistake that I see all the time, and it's how the call to action is created, right? And I see it, people overcomplicate it. They make it too many steps. What is an effective way, or the most effective way, to take people from a webinar to create an action, whether it be an order, a sale, an opt-in? How do you go about doing that? Are you just giving them the URL? Are you pushing them to a page with your software? What is your recommended way of going about this?
So I just want to make sure I got your question right. So what technically is the best way to get them to take action on the webinar? Is that
Yeah, I get. Yeah. I mean, that was a much more concise way to say
Sure.
it.
And by the way, before we finish up, let me tell you how you can get at least an 80% webinar show up rate. The best way would be with a link that is available for people to click right on the webinar. So they click the link, they go straight to, if it's a purchase page, they go straight to the purchase page. If it's apply for a strategy session, they apply right there.
And that's one of the beauties, I think, of stealth seminars. I mean, if you're running webinars on GoToWebinar, stuff like that, it's much more difficult to have links appearing at the right times and stuff like that. But that's, I think, one of the strengths of stealth seminars. Now, you just said something, and it was in line with where I was going, and I want to hear this. How do you get an 80% show-up rate on your webinars?
Well, don't you think we should save that for near the end, Derek?
Okay. Yeah, we'll save that. Oh, you got me all excited because it was on my list. I wanted to talk about registration and getting people to show up. But okay, now let's talk about selling on webinars and price points. And what are you seeing from a price point perspective where people are having success with webinars and selling?
It's really, it's a wide variety. It's anywhere from $7 to literally, I work with a lot of people that sell houses on webinars. They sell real estate, lots on webinars. Mm-hmm. And so in those cases, it's typically in the $35,000 to $45,000 range. Now, from the standpoint of what makes sense, if you're promoting it and paying for traffic, then you'd want to have a product that's at least $250, or at least a lifetime customer value of $250. Even better if it's closer to $500, because then it makes it much easier. It's once you get all your numbers in line, you can drive as many clients as you like to your webinar, and you can acquire those clients. You can acquire them right away, and you can acquire them at a profit.
Got it. Yep, absolutely. And one of the reasons I asked that question as well, and I think you said it, is the beauty of webinars is it's not, from my perspective, like the traditional e-commerce, sales page where there is an upper end to how much somebody will go and click a buy now button and spend on a website through sort of an online sales process. What I see is sort of the paradigm changes is when you have that live event and that webinar. And, to the point of real estate, one of the businesses I'm involved in and a partner in is a large property investing portal. And my business partner in that, he started a property investment fund, okay, where people were investing money into this fund, and he was then investing. And through primarily webinars alone. So the fund total maxed out, he's raised $75 million, and well over half of that was raised off of webinars, right? So, every day it blows my mind the ability for webinars to create an outcome that you could not create in a traditional, sales page. And it's that live event that I find so powerful. So, all right. So, then before we get to this 80%, and it's killing me, but I got one more question for you. And that is, there's a lot of businesses out there where they don't have a personality, right? They're more of let's say it's an e-commerce website, it's a brand. There's not necessarily a voice, a personality, but they could still use webinars. How do you advise people to use webinars in businesses where there may not be that voice or personality?
Oh, great question. And by the way, I still got a huge smile on my face because to raise 50% of 75 million via webinars is crazy. I mean, that is just, that's just incredible, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just amazing. And so that's the sort of stuff that gets me really jazzed.
Yeah. It works, right?
Yeah. It's amazing the power. I'm sure at some point in time, something will come along and it'll replace it. But I don't see anything yet. There's nothing that I see, It'll probably be like, I don't even know what it'll be,
Well,
because
you know what it is. Here's what I think it is. I think that it's not going to be webinars are replaced with something. It's just people like yourself driving webinars to become even better and better. How we can deliver them, how we can create a more engaging live experience, right?
Right.
And then create those with scale. And I think that's what it is. And in fact, I'm going to go off on a little tangent here. One of my businesses in Australia, I was in Melbourne a couple months ago. While I was in Melbourne, Tony Robbins was running an event there. His I forget which one it was, one of his big events, and for the first time ever, Tony wasn't actually there. He appeared as a hologram, a live hologram on stage, and he was in the US. But he created this live event where people felt he was there. He wasn't there, right? He was not there. He was effectively doing a holographic webinar for these people, and had a tremendous response to that, right? So I agree. I don't think webinars are going anywhere. I think they're going to continue to evolve as technology evolves. And just as a side note, it's up to you to keep evolving that technology.
Well, I will try.
So you gotta get to work on that. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here, and now for the one that you teased us with, and that is show up. And this is a problem with webinars, and I know it's a problem with webinars, is getting people to actually turn up. And the numbers I hear across my members, my students, my customers of show up rates, particularly when you're dealing with a person that doesn't have necessarily a brand or any sort of celebrity within their industry. So we were talking about Frank Kern a few minutes ago, and you said, he can talk for 3 hours and everybody hangs on his word, and they all show up, right? Why? Because he's Frank. He probably can send out 2 emails and get everybody to show up. But that's not the norm across the industry of people just starting to set up webinars. They're not getting those kind of show up rates. So what are they doing wrong? And how are they going to get that 80% that you just teased us with?
Sure. Well, all right. So first off, if people don't have, that brand, that celebrity, that's okay. Still Seminar started, it's been around for 5.5 years now, offering it to other people. And it started really by those early adopters who did have that brand. But, through the years, the client base has really changed. And now we have a much higher a much higher number of people that don't have that. We deal with a lot of people that are, in elective dentistry, plastic surgeons, law, all those sorts of things. So if people are in those sorts of businesses and they don't have that status of the guru type person themselves, what they should do is either deliver the webinar themselves or have someone on their staff deliver the webinar. And what they should do is think about what are the three most attractive, compelling, valuable things that they could deliver to their prospects. And they should task somebody with creating that webinar, and that will work unbelievably well. And then what that does is that leads us into how can we get these people to show up? Because what ends up happening is, as you mentioned, most people have a very low show-up rate. The typical show-up rate is going to be somewhere around 25 to 35%. And so this particular strategy that I'm going to talk to you about, you can do on your own. You can do it right away. And this is for cold traffic. So these are people that are visiting your website but don't have a current relationship with you. Or you can use any sort of pay-per-click or whatever it might be. And that is, you have the appropriate webinar schedule to get the approximately 80% show-up rate. And I'm going to give you that schedule right now. I also have a free download if you'd like to get it. I can give you that URL. That webinar schedule is this. On your webinar registration page, you offer 3 options for these people to attend these events. 3 options, no more, no less. The first option is going to be at the top of the next hour. So if someone visits your webpage at 2:30 p.m., it's going to be coming up at 3 p.m. If someone visits your webpage at 5:45, it's going to be coming up at 6. If someone visits at 9:15, it's going to be coming up at 10. Now, this schedule is only going to run for 12 hours of the day, so it's not going to run all night because that wouldn't look believable. So your first one is going to be at the top of the next hour. The second option that someone can register for your webinar is tomorrow at 11 a.m. The third option is the day after at 7 p.m. And what you will get by using this webinar registration page schedule options is you will get an approximate 80% show-up rate. And I've seen it across all different types of industries, all different types of geographic locations. It is unbelievably powerful. And most people will always choose the top of the hour. If people are, out and about surfing the internet, they probably have some time. They arrive at your page, and in their head, they're saying, "Oh, I'm just in time. Well, I got to wait a little bit, but I'm pretty close here." So they register for that. They're already on the event player page. So it doesn't matter if our email goes missing. And some people might not know this. Obviously you do, Derek, but approximately 25% of all email that people want goes missing for one reason or another. So you take the whole email thing out of the equation, and that's how you end up with an approximate 80% show-up rate.
And that's fantastic. I was scribbling notes as you were revealing that, because I think it is one of the biggest problems people are facing. They're out there, they're buying traffic, they're buying leads. People are opting in, saying, "Yeah, I want to go to this event," but they're not showing up. The top of the hour that's brilliant. And I think what a lot of people listening need to realize is to do a top of the hour type schedule, you can't use a go-to webinar type service. You need something like Stealth Seminars that has that technology built in, which brings me to the final close that I wanted to ask you, Geoff, is tell us a bit about Stealth Seminars. You've created this incredible system, and I think it's something that people have a little bit of trouble wrapping their heads around as they're getting started. But quickly explain Stealth Seminars. Why is it the service people need for running these types of webinars?
Sure. Oh, and by the way, if people, if they didn't happen to scribble down all the notes that you did about that, they can go to bestwebinarschedule.com and they can get a PDF cheat sheet of that.
Nice.
Stealth Seminar is, it's a service that is unbelievably powerful. It can be unbelievably profitable for most people. It's incredibly easy to use because Stealth Seminar support is available, and we recommend set up all your events. So, it's a tool that you can use that will automate your events. Within that tool, you have your webinar registration pages, you have your webinar thank you pages, you have your webinar event player pages, you have your webinar streaming, you have your replay pages. So you have everything you need to run webinars. And it's a tool that, again, most people find incredibly profitable. And we know that once people get a webinar up and running, in all likelihood, it'll be a success, which is why we go to the trouble to set up everything for people, because we want them to succeed, because when people succeed, obviously, we succeed. So.
And let me just add on to that, because I've used your service. I've sent over the years, lots of people to use your service, and if there's one thing, and there's lots of things, first of all, that sets you apart from any other service I've used, whether it be reliability, uptime, you've got a bulletproof system there. But the thing that truly blew me away when I signed up was the fact that you guys just did all the work for me. I literally took a recording of a podcast, of a webinar that I wanted to play. I filled out a form where you asked me some questions. I gave you this recording. And not only did they set it up, they integrated it with my e-commerce system. I was absolutely blown away. And, I truly believe for those people that are just getting into this, when you go out and shop the different systems out there, you may find cheaper systems than Stealth Seminars. But what I can tell you from personal experience is you're going to spend far more time, far more money, far more aggravation trying to make those systems work. So if you want to just get up and running and have something that just works and have a team there supporting you, Geoff, you have my endorsement 100%, because I've been there, and it's just fantastic. And the fact is trying to set this stuff up on your own would be complicated, right? But your team just does it. So yeah, I love it. Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much, Derek. I really appreciate that. That's, I'm not a technical person myself. And so I wanted to, have this service be appropriate for a person like me that isn't technical, that doesn't want to spend the hours, days, and in some cases, weeks and months, setting this stuff up. So thank you so much for those kind words. I really, really appreciate it.
Fantastic. And as we wrap up here, is there any resources, websites that you'd like to recommend where people can, get more information about your services, about webinars?
Yeah, if they go to bestwebinarschedule.com, that'd be a good starting point. If they want to find out about the webinar system, they can go to stealthseminar.com. And either of those two links will give them lots of information and lots of best practices and lots of free courses, articles, blogs, podcasts, and so on.
All right. Well, that's fantastic. Geoff, I want to thank you very, very much for being here and being so generous with what you were sharing and just divulging all of those best practices. So again, Geoff, thank you very, very much.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, Derek.
All right, everybody, that was Geoff Ronning, and I hope you guys took a ton of notes there. If you missed any of the URLs, we will be including a transcript and in the show notes, all the URLs Geoff mentioned there. So once again, thanks very much for attending this Entrepreneur Ignited podcast, and we will see you in the next episode.
You're listening to the Entrepreneur Ignited podcast. where we aim to simplify online business so you can make more money. Now, here's your host, Derek Gehl.